What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 457 of the Established Run NBA podcast. Game one of the NBA Finals is in the books, and another epic comeback from the Indiana Pacers gives them the 1-0 lead, a game in which they led for less than half a second of the entire game. They come out with the victory. Here to talk with me about it is Austin Yamada. Austin, how are you feeling after game one? The Pacers fade continues to get shoved right down our throats. How are you doing?
Yeah, the majority of this pod will just be me apologizing profusely to the Pacers. So,
what was the big takeaway for you in this one? Obviously, like it's another big fourth quarter kind of comeback. Why are the Pacers? How are they able to do this? How are they able to defy win probability models 3 or 4 different times now in the playoffs in ways that they had less than 1% chance to potentially win? What is the Pacers' secret recipe for success here?
um, I guess so. I have a two-part answer to that. The first one is that I'm not sure what it is about them specifically that is so conducive to these historic comebacks that we've seen time and time again. They do play up tempo. They do know how to change variance when they're down versus when they're up. Like when they're up, they really slow the pace down and they make sure to shorten the number of possessions. And when they're down, they increase pace and they do everything you're supposed to do when you're up versus down. But like I don't know what it is about the Pacers that they do that other fast pace teams don't do. Like this level of like this level of these many comebacks in a short time span are just unprecedented. Um, so from that regard, it's really hard to say. And like this is just another time where they're hitting improbable shot after improbable shot, chaining them together. Like a lot of their makes were pretty. Like Nemhard had a step back three, and there were a couple other like I would say poor shots that went in. But at the same time, what are they doing well? I do think that they moved the ball against OKC defense in a way that was better than any team that has faced OKC thus far, including the Denver Nuggets. Um, Maybe Denver at the end of the series was moving the ball similarly, and they just had worse shooters shooting the ball. But like outside of maybe Denver late series, we haven't seen a team solve this defense quite as well. So like, do I expect this level of shot making that happened in the fourth to continue in game two? Like I don't, but you do have to give credit that they like solved this defense in a better way than a lot of these other teams did in game one.
Yeah, the amazing thing is it didn't look that way. It didn't look that way in the first half of this game. You look at the box score and you see 24 turnovers for Indiana compared to 6 for Oklahoma City, and you think there's just no way that this is even a competitive game, let alone an Indiana win with that gap in possessions. They end up making up for the gap in possessions by just smacking around OKC on the boards 56-39 there, and then making 7 more 3-pointers than OKC. OKC only getting off 30 at the 3-point line, Indiana getting off 39 and making 18 for 46% of those. But that was the interesting thing to me, was that the game started in a way that it didn't seem like Indiana would be the team that was able to move the ball kind of effectively and get into their flow of offense. OKC was disrupting all of those things and forcing all of these turnovers. And I think the question mark for me, we'll get into a little bit more of the texture of that fourth quarter comeback and lineup decisions and Tyrese Haliburton shot making and all those things in a second. But the question for me, as a person who ended up unloading on OKC series stuff before, which got a lot of positive closing line value from where I hit it. I hit it like minus 650. It closed at minus 800. And we both were on game one, -9, which finished at -10. So got a lot of closing line value that, we can share in our Skolansky bucks. But Indiana, they saw a recipe in the second half with low turnovers where it's like, what if they can do that for the rest of the series? What if they can keep turnovers down? Because if they can keep turnovers down, then this looks much closer in terms of a match here. So what are your thoughts on who's going to win out from that perspective? It's weird to see OKC kind of win that in a big way in the turnover battle in game one and still come out with a loss. It's a little bit shocking. But what do you think that Indiana, who has been a historically low turnover team throughout the playoffs and these runs that they've made, do you think that their second half is more indicative of their ability to take care of the basketball going forward?
I think that is the path for optimism if you are a Pacers fan, is like we talk about Jokic and Luka as these like, adapters series to series, but like there's some credence to be had with Hallie being a mid-game adapter to a defense that we have seen consistently this playoffs. And it doesn't matter what defense you've thrown at him; he will figure it out on the fly. And I think he obviously is a large factor for these Pacers comebacks in a way that's not just, oh, Hallie hit the game winner, right? Because Hallie wasn't that good this game all game. Even his total line was like he took 13 shots. He went to the free throw line 0 times. He had 6 assists, 3 turnovers, 14 points. He wasn't that good for the majority of the game, but he was incredible in the fourth. Um, and he is the head of the snake. So yeah, I think you just have to give a lot of credit to Haliburton for just really being able to diagnose a defense at halftime, realize what they're doing, and just kind of adapt to it. And like that is a piece that I'm trying to think back. Yeah, maybe you could say Ja, but none of the first opponents that OKC has faced has really had this level of point guard that dominates the ball, takes care of the ball. Really orchestrates the offense. I mean, Jokic does from a center perspective, but as far as a lead guard who brings the ball up and gets people into offense and knows when to push, knows when to slow, knows to get the ball to who, like Halliburton is the best that OKC has faced. Um, so like, I still don't really believe in Indiana's shooters in the way that they're shooting 46% from three. They don't have like a knockdown shooter that would crush OKC's defense, but outside of that, like Indiana is kind of built pretty well, to take on OKC. Between Halliburton and the 5 out offense, and just like OKC doesn't kill them with size the way that they could be killed by other teams. So yeah, if they can take care of the ball, this is definitely a series. It is quite unsettling that, like you said, OKC won the turnover battle 24-6 and lost this game. Like you can look at their field goal percentage, you can look at just Shea and J Dub, struggling on their like half court isolation shots, especially down the like everything kind of just failed them down the stretch between Shea and J Dub missing their half court isolation shots, and then the threes not falling at the worst time. It's important to note, like OKC was actually shooting. I think they were both shooting like about 40% for three going into the fourth, and OKC had a 15-point lead, and then the 3-point just machinations just totally swung pro Indiana and against OKC, which isn't necessarily a luck thing, but maybe to that degree it is. I think I'm rambling just because like I can make a case for kind of both sides for paths going forward.
Yeah, let's focus in on the late fourth quarter run. I want to focus in specifically at the 3:24 mark. Shea's at the free throw line. He puts him up 8 with his second made free throw. At this point, the Thunder sub out Chet Holmgren for Casey Wallace and go small. We had talked about this in the preview pod. Mike Gallagher noted that he expects there to be situations where OKC goes centerless, essentially against Indiana, to try to deal with Indiana's spacing. I think it also makes sense, theoretically, late in game situations, to try to get as many switchable athletes on the floor to try to cover the 3-point line, right? Like you're trying to avoid 3-pointers. The challenge with that is a lot of 3-pointers can also come off of offensive rebounds. And if you can't get boards in these situations, you can't end defensive possessions. And that's ultimately kind of what did OKC in here. So from that point forward, OKC's up 8 with 3:24 left. OKC gets 1 rebound in the final 3 minutes and 25 seconds. They get out rebounded 7-1 during that stretch. They give up 3 offensive rebounds during that stretch. Pascal Siakam was just crushing on the offensive boards late in the game, and ends up getting a really important putback and another offensive rebound to get another good look in a possession. And it just, to me, the whole game, it felt like Chet was terrible, which was another thing that led to these centerless lineups. I think in general was that Chet really struggled in this game. Hartenstein was very effective in his minutes, But I think that those centerless lineups aren't really the best decision. Like Chet should be able to handle himself on the perimeter in a way that you can have him out there in those situations and it's fine to close. And I think it's really important to be able to get defensive rebounds, protect the paint, and do those different things kind of in late game situations to avoid kind of the easy baskets, avoid the putbacks, avoid the offensive rebounds, avoid the shots at the rim that can help fuel comebacks. And I think Dagnall was a little bit hyper focused on trying to avoid the 3-point line. And a lot of the 3-point line stuff that Indiana gets just naturally, honestly, is especially in late game situations, is sort of self-created 3-point line. It's like just moving through one screen, and then it's not like ball movement 3-point line stuff late in games. So I thought that was a mistake for Dagnall. Obviously, have the benefit of looking back with hindsight here. But the lineups in the first half, they were fine, the centerless lineups. I think they were +2 in the first half and then -9 in that stretch in the last 325 of the game. I'm expecting to see less of those going forward, partly because I expect Chet to play better than he did in this game. And I think Chet playing so poorly is what led to more of those lineups. But what were your thoughts on Dagnall's decision to go super small there? And what were your thoughts on kind of Chet Holmgren's disappointing game one?
Yeah. Worth noting too, like whether Chet played well or not, whether OKC went to zero big lineup or not, they already decreased the amount of bigs that they played all game. Like they did try a no big lineup. Let me see, when was this? There was a stretch at the end of the first half where they went no big as well, and that one went okay. I think it was a +2, but then also like there was very little overlap between the two. I'm double checking here. Hartenstein played 17 minutes.
I
He really
don't
got
think
cut
they
down
overlapped. I don't think they overlapped at all
at all.
in the game.
Okay. Yeah. So like worth noting, like I think people will say like, why did Dagnall try this weird lineup in when it mattered most? But like A, he was already trying to stop a bleeding mid run, and then B, he kind of was trending this way all game, and it went okay at the end of the first half. I don't really feel strongly that the no big lineup um, is particularly like you can't run it for long stretches, but I don't feel strongly one way or the other that you can't use it or that you have to go to it again. Obviously, if they're going to get out rebounded by Indiana the way they did, then it's probably not feasible. Um, Worth noting, I do think Miles Turner is a very good player, is one of their three best players, very valuable from a macro sense. But he is kind of an odd fit guarding, getting switched onto these like Shea, basically. I think he can hold up fine versus anyone else. And like he had 6 turnovers today or yesterday. He was getting swiped down on in the paint. He was setting, illegal screens. So if you notice, the OKC subs out Chet at 324. At the very next stoppage, they sub out Miles Turner for Obi Toppin. Now, I think you just have to think about not only the effects that when you go zero big have on your own team, but also what it has on the other team. And so if Obi Toppin is not making his shots, I would say that Miles Turner is definitely a better player than Obi Toppin. But if Obi Toppin is shooting 5 of 8 from 3, and you aren't going to punish them at the rim, because obviously you basically take away a shot blocker, then, in this situation, you could argue that that trade isn't quite as beneficial as you might think, because like if you're not taking advantage of Obi's lack of shot blocking, like Obi, while not a great defender, is more switchable than Miles Turner, and he is a better shooter. Miles Turner is a well above average shooter for a big, but like Obi Toppin has that quick trigger. He can, he also just spends more time outside of the base. Like he provides the spacing that you would really want from a center. So if you do get that switch, I think you really need to take advantage of Obi Toppin's weaknesses. They still settled for a lot of like jumpers and pull up threes. I know Shea had a couple attacks at the rim post Miles Turner, but they settled for a lot of threes. Against these Obi Toppin lineups, and I think you really have to get to the rim there. Obviously,
Yep.
like we're talking hindsight, like we're over analyzing 3 minutes of game
Yep.
time, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
those are kind of my thoughts about the whole double big line or zero big lineup.
Yeah, so after the substitution that you're noting at the 307 mark, here's the shot selection for OKC. Shea gets to the line for two free throws. J Dub misses a three. Lou Dort misses a three. Shea makes a two. Shea gets a layup blocked with Pascal at the rim. J Dub misses sort of a step back mid range two. Shea misses a 14-footer mid range two. So the shot quality in that 6-7 shots that they took, two of them threes that really like game score situation up 6-8, like 2 to 3 minutes left. You don't really need the three to try to put games away, and especially like for me, this is where and Lou Dort was especially great the whole series long. But I've been critical of Lou Dort's shot selection throughout the playoffs, and he was making shots in this game, so it ended up being fine. But I think too often he's been a little too confident from the 3 point line, and I think in some of these key situations, this is sort of like what I would refer to as like Boston Celtics itis, where it's like they're trying to go for they're making a bunch of 4th and 1 decisions. If we want to make a football analogy, 4th and 1 decisions like at their own side of the field that like analytically are like, yeah, that's the right thing to do, but you don't need to do it when you're up 14 points with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Like you don't need to do it. There's no point to do it. Just kick the ball away and like let the clock bleed out. And so I think in a lot of these instances, teams are taking threes that analytically like look correct and whatnot, but the actual added win probability of running the full shot clock, kind of like getting Shea and J Dub can create these looks from mid range that are that are just as efficient, and wind more clock down and higher probability of makes. I think slight nitpicking of understanding the results here, but I think that's one thing that I thought OKC, especially with Miles Turner out of the game, as you allude to, didn't make enough of an effort to try to get to the rim in those situations. Then I want to talk about Haliburton. He's now 4 for 4 in these like game winning, game tying type shots, late shot clock. Just to put some of this in context, like the best players in the world in history on these types of shots are usually like 40%, 35-40%. Like these are really really low probability shots because it's isolation, it's one-on-one. You're basically, the goal of the offense is to make sure that the defense doesn't get another crack at it. So you're not necessarily trying to take the best shot, you're trying to take the best shot you can get late enough in the shot clock that the other team doesn't get a shot. So it's usually a very inefficient shot. Halburton's now 4 for 4 in these spots, and has as many makes in these spots as like Kobe in his playoff career. Really outrageous shot making from Haliburton, and it honestly feels. I felt this in the Knicks series when OG was at the line. I was like, "Don't you miss one because he's going to try to take a three," and I felt the same way in this one where when Shea missed that two, and the ball got in Haliburton's hands, I was like, I think this is over. Like it feels inevitable with him at this point. So the guy who had the hitch in his shot that kept people from being excited about drafting him is the guy that is an isolation knockdown king at the end of games. It's surprising, and it's also incredible to watch a player that is mostly known for their ability to take apart a defense with their passing ability to be this locked in late game situations. Obviously, it's a super small sample size, but even so, the guy has not missed yet in these spots. So, what do you think it is about Haliburton that makes him effective in these spots specifically? And are you at the point that you see Haliburton in that situation compared to you see Shea in that situation, and you're more fearful of Haliburton? Because I think I am. I think I'm at the point where I'm like, Haliburton's he's gonna knock this down. It's over. Like Shea gets the ball, I'm like, waiting, oh, like he'll probably knock this down, but Haliburton, I'm like, oh, it's over. Where are you at with Haliburton's late game efficiency?
Yeah, I'm looking up just like his isolation play type stats right now, regular season versus playoffs. Um, so in the regular season, he was a 0.93 points per possession, which sounds really bad, but these shots aren't efficient. So he's actually slightly above average in that regard. He has skyrocketed to 1.08 points per possession in the playoffs, which is an incredible number. But not only that, I'm looking at his frequency of shots taken. It was 9.5% frequency in the regular season and 15% in the playoffs. So he's taking more and he's making way more. That 1 point, uh, let me see. I would need to put a filter to see like where it ranks, but like his efficiency right now would be up there with among the best players in the game in the playoffs. I can't get there with you in terms of like comparing him to Shea. Um, I don't I hesitate to call it lucky because I don't think it's maybe like none of the shots that he made he's incapable of making. I don't know how often he's going to make this level of them. And we're talking about that bounce that he had in the Garden. Even this shot was like a really difficult shot at any other point in the game besides where you need it specifically to lose the game. Uh, I'm sure like OKC doesn't want him taking that last shot, but like any other possession of the game, you're perfectly fine with that shot that he took. Like a pull up, long two. It wasn't even like a true mid range. It was a long two. Um, but credit to the guy. He keeps making them. Um, I think there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking where like if he makes that shot like he did, you say like, why did they not get the ball out of his hands? Like OKC should have been way more aggressive of a coverage. You can't let this guy who's made every single game winner get that shot off. But I think at the same time, like his shot making was not a large reason why that comeback happened. It was his playmaking. And so if OKC goes back into the time machine and plays a really aggressive coverage to get the ball out of his hands, and he makes a short roll pass to Pascal Siakam, and Siakam either takes a short jumper or Siakam makes the extra pass, then people are going to say they lost that fourth quarter because they let Indiana pick apart the defense. And why are you just selling out now to give either Pascal Siakam the conference finals MVP and leading scorer this kind of shot or this 4-on-3 opportunity? Why would you do that? And I think that presents the issue of what makes Indiana tough to guard is like they put you in that kind of position. And if I'm being totally honest, like I don't really believe in revisionist history. Like, yeah, Hallie has killed you over and over again, but like I'm generally okay with what they did because if you go back and look, if Hallie tries to drive to the rim there's not enough time and he would run into a lot of bodies. Like they played it in a way that like I'm sure their coverages told them to do and the way that the film study told them to do. I don't know if you agree with me or not here, because Hallie has been killing people over and over, but
Yeah.
like there's no win situation here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we are Monday morning quarterbacking on a Friday morning or Friday morning quarterbacking, but the I like in those situations. I like bringing late help from unexpected locations. So instead of the primary screen setter being the hedge out or the trap or kind of what looks like a normal play situation, bringing help from the corner. And I know it's one pass away in a corner three, and I know that's shaky. But once you get down to 2-3 seconds left on a shot clock, you're asking somebody to execute a pass perfectly, somebody to catch and release. When in their head, they don't know how much time they have left. Like the ball handler who has the ball has a rhythm and a feel for how much time is left because they have looked up at the clock and they've got that internal clock in their head the whole time. The shooter who has to catch and shoot does not have the benefit of that. And in the corner, they don't have the benefit of the shot clock like directly facing them as well. So I think you get rushed shot attempts in those situations. And I'd rather have a rushed open shot attempt than an inflow contested shot attempt from the best player. That's the way that I think through these things, just generally.
I'm actually rewatching this possession now. I'm trying to think of like even with the benefit of slowing the game down, slowing the video down, and having this 2020 hindsight. I think OKC did an okay job, not perfect, but I'm just watching now. So Neesmith comes to set a ball screen. Hallie rejects it because I don't think he wants more bodies in the area. So it's him on Kaysen. He's driving right. In the corners, Caruso guarding Siakam. So Caruso does stunt at Hallie with about 2.4 left, but Siakam does the right thing and leaves the corner and cuts baseline to be at the rim. So Caruso basically stunts long enough to try and make Hallie make a decision, and then recovers to Siakam. Meanwhile, Dort, who was on Obi in the opposite wing, rotates down to cover Siakam. So, like, I guess Caruso could have hard blitzed and then had Dort cover Siakam and leave basically Obi wide open for a wing three, which is probably I don't know. Do you want Hallie like a Hallie pull up over Kaysen versus an Obi wide open three? It's probably close.
Yeah.
But you definitely don't want the Siakam roll to the rim with 2.3. That's your worst case scenario.
Yeah, especially with the
that.
personnel that was on the floor as well. Like there's no rim protection on the floor, which is another thing that Rick Carlisle should get a lot of credit for. I know Haliburton was giving him credit in the post game about how he trusts them to make those decisions. A lot of coaches would call timeout in those situations, and Haliburton was saying like Carlisle just really trusts us. I think one of the things from Carlisle's perspective there is it's not just trusting your offense. It's also like I don't want to give the defense any opportunity to try to tactically dismantle whatever we're going to try to do. And I think in these situations where it's a live situation, there's no timeout kind of in between. Caruso is the one having to make that decision, right? He's not being coached specifically like, hey, we want you to stunt at Haliburton and make him try to make a quick decision. They don't have any rim protection on the floor, so as Siakam like goes to the basket, like he has to kind of get back there. So yeah, I think ultimately really great player, really great coach, really great execution, late game situation. I think you're probably right that OKC probably handled it as well as they could. I just generally would rather force a pass with 2 or 3 left on the shot clock because I think the shooter gets rushed. And I just think a shooter I think these late game situations, even though the efficiency levels are really low, just generally in isolations, I think the shooters are generally the best guys in the league are generally like in comfort spots in those. And I think Haliburton like has so much comfort with his giant step backs. Like he creates so much space on his step backs compared to a lot of other guys. And he really loves going right, which is unusual for right-handed shooters. They usually typically like going left, but he's very comfortable going right in these spots. And I think that was, I think it's like all the little ins and outs of the decision-making towards the end of the game that, OKC was making the decision, for the smaller lineup. This was, they, at the 22-second mark, there was a timeout because there was a challenge on a ball out of bounds play. And OKC had a decision to make in terms of what lineup they want out there. And that decision, when you're making it, you're making the decision for what lineup you want out there for your offensive possession and for your defensive possession, because you have to assume that Carlisle's not going to take a timeout. And so they chose kind of the smaller lineup, have a little bit more space, try to get Shea more space and get to the rim. Shea was pretty well contained. And Nembhard and Nesmith did a great job in the fourth quarter, just generally on both Shea and J-Dub and making things a little bit harder on them. And it ends up being that on the other end, you don't have anybody that's a rim protector. So you don't have the ability, it's not as clear to send a late blitz or, late help to try to disrupt the flow of the play. And here we are, and OKC's down 1-0, looking at, trying to salvage a game from the first 2 at home. They went to 11.5-point favorites at open immediately upon winning game 1. Losing game 1, excuse me. I'm looking to see if that has moved at all at this point. It's 11, I guess 10.5, 11. My first instinct was, I know the zigzag, I know the motivation. I know that we thought 9 was a good number to bet on OKC in the opener. I'm a little shook by Indiana being able to keep that game within striking distance the whole game, despite all the turnovers. Like that's the thing that like that level of turnovers, every prior OKC opponent has turned that into a 10 goes to 20, 20 goes to 30, and then the game's over. This kept going like 10 goes to 15, 10 goes to 18, 18 back to 10. Like they kept it in this like 8 to 12 range most of the game, despite all these turnover issues. What were your thoughts on the opening line at 11.5, which has now been bet down to 11 for OKC in game 2?
So yeah, I actually got an 8.5 in game 1, and I gave out a 9. Like it closed 10. I feel good about that bet. And I do believe in zigzag and sort of like OKC adjustments. Like OKC has a lot of things they could do. Like not play 11 guys is probably number
yes.
1. And so I said right when like if Shea with point 0.3 left. If OKC misses and doesn't win here, it's OKC or nothing for me. I was hoping for a 10 or better, given
Yeah.
that I just had an 8.5 and like widely available 9 in game one. And like you said, they just lost in a like not just like if you play this game over 100 times, like OKC wins a majority of the time, but they also probably win less than their implied money line going into the game. Like Indiana did sort of outperform the spread no matter how you slice it. Um, I would still pay a point more than I paid game one for that kind of, I guess, yeah, zigzag effort, etc. adjustments. And I said 10 or better. I know you said 11 and a half. It went down to 11. Other places open 10 and a half up to 11. It kind of just converged, at
Yeah.
11. But at 11, like it was I can't play it. I can't pay
Yeah.
the price. And so I think
Yeah.
for a lot of factors, it's like OKC or nothing for me. I don't really want Indiana plus 11, but I am also not betting OKC 10 and a half or greater. They don't deserve it after the way that Indiana has performed. And I think like as we look back on this, Indiana missed their threes at the end. Or sorry, OKC missed their threes at the end, and they didn't shoot that well from two. But I don't really think this is an OKC issue that much. I think it's really just Indiana played well, not OKC played poorly.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking at it like, yeah, I think the one thing in the box score that like I'm not really trusting is maybe like TJ McConnell playing 16 and a half minutes, shooting 4 of 6 from the field and 1 of 1 from three. I do think
Yep.
he could be a liability in this series, as we discussed in the preview. Just like
Yep.
leaving him wide open, there's an outlet to sort of like make them play 5-on-4, and then the way that
Yep.
he scores in transition, just getting to the rim off of pick and rolls, like OKC really shuts that down. But like it's really hard to otherwise pick away at like Thomas Bryant hit a three in the fourth, but other than that, it's really hard to say like OB was good, but it's really hard to say like there were so many things that Indiana did that they can't do again. I don't see that many
Yeah.
things otherwise outside of just shot making.
Yeah. Yeah. They
So
won the they won
I'm
the
not
minute.
betting this unless
OKC won the minutes heavily when TJ McConnell was on the floor. He's a minus 13 in the 17 minutes, despite being very effective. I didn't love some of the lineup decisions that they happened to be using when TJ McConnell was on the floor, but they ended up being largely successful. But like, I couldn't believe we saw AJ Mitchell in the first half of an NBA Finals game when he hasn't been playing first half rotations throughout the playoffs. Like, I think that's Dagnall being like, I want to get everybody's feet wet in terms of playing in the finals and stuff. I didn't love that one. It didn't really, it's hard to say it didn't like really bite them. I mean, he was a minus 3 in the 4 minutes that he played. They lose by 1. I didn't love that. I didn't love Isaiah Joe playing ahead of Aaron Wiggins. We talked a lot about Aaron Wiggins kind of coming in. I thought Aaron Wiggins, when he did get defensive matched up with TJ McConnell, I thought he did a great job and kept him out of the paint. He had a nice block that led to a steal as well. And I think just generally, like a lot of the rotation stuff from Dagnall was a little cute. Like I just thought it was just like a little like, we're trying to see what different buttons we can push instead of just like pushing all your main buttons and just kind of going from there. I also thought the centerless lineups, they came without Kenrich Williams. I'd rather it be with Kenrich Williams at center. Like have some positional size there that comes with all the flexibility and the switchability and different things. These lineups that were like Wallace, Dort, Caruso, Shea, J-Dub and stuff, they're just really small. And so I just thought there were a lot of rotational decisions that were questionable from Dagnall that I think can be cleaned up. On the flip side, I thought you could see Carlisle was ready to pretty much condense things on the guys he thought could play. If you see Obi Toppin at 25 minutes in the box score, that one like jumps off the page, right? Because Obi Toppin's been in the teens most of the playoffs. You see Thomas Bryant got 8 minutes, and he was very ineffective in those 8 minutes. They were a -9 in those 8 minutes. You look at when those 8 minutes came. The first half rotation came after Miles Turner picked up his third foul and after Obi had just been subbed and Hartenstein was on the floor. And I think Carlisle was like, maybe I can steal 4 minutes here with Thomas Bryant against Hartenstein. But when Shea was back on the floor, like Shea was just cooking Thomas Bryant. It's like, okay, we can't do this. And otherwise, you get Obi out there for 25. You get the minutes starting to get bumped up for Haliburton. He ends up playing 39. Siakam gets up to 35. Neesmith and Nembhard in the low 30s. I think they can get extended even more. Shepard was out there, got the first crack, got into some foul trouble early. And then Matherin, Matherin's continued like the last since getting back into the rotation in the Knicks series, he's been a better defensive player than advertised. Like he's held up okay in those spots. And we noted that we thought Mathurin would have to be on the floor just because of like size, length, and willingness to score in this series. And so I thought like Carlisle went into the game and it seemed like he knew what small group of players he had to work with and how to like figure out the combinations to condense things a little bit. And Dagnall looked like he was kind of gonna play with his food a little bit, and I didn't like that. I thought came back to bite them a little bit. I don't love the centerless lineups without Kenrich. Like if you're gonna not have Chet or Hartenstein on the floor, at least have Kenrich on the floor. He rebounds really well for his size. He can do a little paint protection and different things, and so I think that's where the adjustments going forward for OKC are, is just tighten things up. Caruso was awesome. Lou Dort was fantastic in this game. Kaysen was just okay. He wasn't at his best. J-Dub struggled, and Chet was awful. Although they won the Chet minutes that he was on the floor, they won the minutes that Hartenstein was on the floor. They won the minutes they had a center on the floor in both iterations. So I think OKC, it's just like going forward, can we condense things and play our best players a little bit more? Can we cut the riffraff and focus in there? Any other thoughts on rotation adjustments going into game 2 for either team?
I totally agree with everything you said on OKC. AJ Mitchell, Joe over Wiggins, like all the things you mentioned, I completely agree with. Ken Rich as well. I think that Kaysen is a good player. I'm not sure he's deserving of over 33 minutes. Just looking at like how you disperse minutes here, Kaysen is fine. He's a nice like defender you can put on point of attack, but he is small. He's a bit of an offensive liability, and he was a minus 13. I think the first cuts out of the rotation are Mitchell and maybe Joe, playing Wiggins more, maybe playing Kenrich a little more, although they just don't want a lot of bigs. I think at the end of the day, this might all be moot if Chet just plays better.
Yep.
Chet, like you said, was not good. He had one block shot. He was 2 of 9 from the field in 23 and a half minutes. Hartenstein is obviously a less natural fit for this series, but like Hartenstein was still productive in his minutes. I'm not saying you have to play Hartenstein 28 minutes. I'm saying, okay, Chet, like you have to play up to your standards here. Yeah, like it, they lost that collapse with the zero big lineup, but I don't think the solution is to put Hartenstein in there in the fourth. I think it's just Chet play better.
Yeah.
Worth noting, in that fourth, one of the few stops OKC did get was actually a Haliburton switch onto Chet, and Chet held up well and forced Hallie into this like step back long. I don't know if it was a 3 or long. I think it's a long 2. And like Chet, one of the benefits of Chet is that he like is a very mobile, switchable big, one of the most mobile and switchable bigs in the league. So like Chet just don't like play better on offense. Either be more assertive or don't be so inefficient, which I know is really easy. So he's not trying to play poorly, but like that's obviously like if Chet plays better, a lot of these sort of like lineup A or lineup B are kind of moot, right? You basically run, if Chet's playing well, Shea, J-Dub, Caruso, Chet, and then one of Kaysen, Dort, Wiggins.
Yep.
I'm not even really faulting Dagnall. Maybe like you said for the first half stuff, but like what he did in the fourth, I don't think was that heinous. I think really just he was working with what he thought made sense, and he was also playing the guys who deserved to play based on the first 42 minutes or 40 minutes of the game. It didn't go that way. So again, all of this is like credit to Indiana more than punishing OKC.
And I agree with that. And in the fourth quarter, there was no Joe, there was no AJ Mitchell. Just for reference, what Austin's referencing in terms of the rotations. The only thing I would have changed, which I understand, like it was happening in the middle of a run, so like it was a reaction to a run and a reaction to Chet playing poorly the whole game. I just wouldn't have subbed Chet for Kaysen. That like there's just no scenario that I want to leave myself that small, because the closing lineup they chose was Caruso, Wallace, J-Dub, Shea, Dort. That is so small. That is really, really hard. I guess like Caruso's your center or J-Dub's your center in these lineups. And the lineups that Indy had in that spot were Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Toppin. And I'd say in terms of like positional size, Nembhard's the only guy that's like average positional size. Like so while that's a small lineup with Pascal and Obi, right? Like positionally, Obi's like a relatively bigger four five. Pascal's a relatively bigger four five. So like you have a five sort of between the two of them covered, and then Neesmith's bigger for his position, Haliburton's bigger for his position. So like, and you could say the same thing about OKC with all their small guys, but when we're talking about like Caruso and J Dub against Siakam and Toppin in terms of size, like I think you're vulnerable on the boards, and that's what ended up kind of costing in that situation. So I'd rather have seen Chet close in that, but to Dagnall's credit, Chet didn't play well enough to close is probably Dagnall's thinking in that. So hard to be like too critical on that, but just obviously with the benefit of hindsight, it looks pretty bad. Indiana, from an adjustment standpoint, Tony Bradley ended up being available for this game. He did not play. I do not expect Tony Bradley to play in the series. They've noted Jarris Walker is expected to miss the first two games. I do think if Jarris Walker was healthy, he'd be a candidate to play in the series. I think it would be a good series for Jarris Walker. But I don't know. He's obviously going to miss game two. I don't know how healthy he'll be to play in game 3, 4, 5. But in terms of rotation adjustments going forward, for the fourth quarter minutes that we saw from Indiana, outside of a stretch in the early fourth quarter that had Siakam, Shepard, McConnell, Mather, and Bryant on the floor, which is a dangerous lineup to start a fourth quarter with, just generally. It was from there on out. It was just Obi, Siakam, Haliburton, Nembhard, Turner, and Neesmith, those six guys. I think those are their best six by like a wide margin for the series. I think you could make a pretty good case that Mathurin is probably their next best guy, but Mathurin is an inconsistent player, and just generally that can get absorbed between Mathurin or Shepard. You're hoping to get a good performance from one of those two guys in each game, and then McConnell's going to have his normal role. But like you, I don't expect to see McConnell's role grow from here. I think he's going to be stuck in the 12 to 16 minute range, and I think from Indiana's side, like I think they know what they need to do. Like it looked to me like Carlisle knew exactly what lineups he needed to get to and what rotation he needed to kind of implement against OKC.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's funny, we're talking about sort of like all of this hindsight 2020 Monday morning quarterbacking. I think someone mentioned in Slack, like this is going to go down as one of the greatest playoff coaching runs of all time, really. He just seems to be pushing all the right buttons. His weird units that like when other coaches try it don't work, they just seem to work. I don't know how much of that is happenstance and good fortune versus like Carlisle mad genius. Even down to the last possession, like you mentioned, like there was a sort of a stoppage with a out of bounds call, but like from the moment OKC puts in their or from the moment Indiana puts in their defensive unit for that second to last possession, they get the stop and they don't call timeout. And I think if they don't score, a lot of either it's going to be a lot of like Indiana had a timeout, why did they not use it? But like looking back on it, like it turned out brilliant. A, because he trusts Haliburton. B, Haliburton made the shot, and then C, like we're diagnosing this sort of like how does OKC rotate things with slowing the video down with 2 seconds. Like you said, OKC didn't have the benefit of. Sure, Indiana calls timeout and gets to draw something up, but that also lets OKC put exactly the players they want out there and discuss exactly how we're going to defend this specific action when they were, preparing for 99 other possessions throughout the course of the game. In that moment, it's you deny OKC the opportunity to do that. And I just thought, like, everyone's going to complain about not using the timeout if it doesn't work, but just sort of like the benefits they gained from that. And again, it's a credit to having Tyrese Haliburton on your team that you can afford to get something good without calling a timeout and drawing something up. But credit to Carlisle. I think we have spent a lot of these pods sort of like praising OKC and saying Indiana's been lucky, but I think we need to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, it wouldn't be an ETR NBA pod if I didn't bring this back to Jokic in some way, shape, or form. But I want to say that it is one of the things that I've loved about this like last, let's say 7-8 years of NBA basketball is the way that skill is being celebrated over athleticism or aesthetic. And Tyrese Haliburton is the guard version of Jokic in a lot of ways, right? Like it's unorthodox it doesn't look it does he's not the greatest athlete in the world out there. If you judge athleticism through how fast can you run, how high can you jump, those types of things, how strong you are, how much you can lift, or different things. But if you judge athleticism through skill and hand-eye coordination and touch and feel, and then you combine that with basketball IQ in terms of understanding game situations, defensive approaches, how to kind of manipulate defenses, it's wonderful to watch players like Haliburton and Jokic, who people had question marks about how high the ceiling was for these players because of the perceived lack of athleticism, excel at the highest levels of basketball. And I think in a lot of ways, Haliburton is starting to come into his own. He's not quite the effective player of Jokic or a Shea or a Giannis or these very top tiers, but I think people are starting to understand, for the player that was called the most overrated player by his peers, how that kid who, as Billy Hoyle might say in White Man Can't Jump, the kid who looks goofy, it's hard work making it look, this goofy to beat you up and down the floor. And that's like Haliburton. It's unorthodox, it's unusual, but it's extremely effective. And it's been that way throughout whatever level of ball he's played. Like at Iowa State, he was awesome. And Knicks loved him from an analytics perspective. And he slid in a way that we questioned immediately, saying, how could the Phoenix Suns, who were a championship level contender, pass on Tyrese Haliburton, and what their path would have looked like had they taken Tyrese Haliburton. But it's really awesome to see a player like Haliburton, who's a little bit unusual and had skeptics because he's a little bit unusual, end up excelling in a way that is really beautiful to watch. Like it's just the way he plays is really fun to watch as well. All right, Austin, before we get out of here, predictions from this point forward. I think you were the only one bold enough to give Indiana 2 games. Mike and I just gave Indiana 1 game in the OKC in 5. We're behind the 8 ball now. Where would your adjusted projection be or prediction be after Indiana stealing game 1 in Oklahoma City?
I think I have to say OKC in 7, right? Like,
yeah.
They just lost a home court game, and then if you just expect the situation to play out as you did in your prior, it would be 7 because they just lost their home game, and that's not even adjusting for or accounting for like how well Indiana really showed themselves in game 1. So I think I have to say OKC in 7.
I am with you. I'm adjusting to OKC in 7 as well. I'm spooked, man. I'm spooked by that level of turnover differential not leading to the typical OKC blowout. And I was kind of counting on, like I said, that the recipe for stealing this series for Indiana was like, okay, you withstand like the 2 blowouts that are going to happen because OKC is just like a much better, overall roster, and you steal the close games. Well, they stole a close game, but it was a game that was supposed to be a blowout based on the turnover differential. That's supposed to be the blowout game. The game 1 at home, you turn the ball over 24 times. OKC takes care of it, turns it over only 6 times. That's supposed to be the game. So I'm a little bit spooked by that. I'll still stick with OKC in 7, but shout out to this Pacers team, man. 2 years in a row, all these guys raising their level in the playoffs in a big way. Andrew Nembhard continues to outperform his regular season stats. You gave the Haliburton isolation stats, which not only are the frequency going up, but the defenses are much tougher in the postseason than the defenses that you're playing in the regular season, right? This is the top half of teams, the top quarter of teams, and now the top 2 teams that are playing in the remaining games. So shout out to the Pacers. They've been exceptional to this point, and they now have home court in the NBA Finals, something that neither of us kind of expected them to leave OKC with at this point in time. Any final parting thoughts, Austin, on what we saw in game 1 of OKC in Indiana?
Yeah, my final thought here is it's just airing some frustration, and this is actually I'm not a Jokic stan the way you are, but I'm going to turn this to Nikola Jokic here. I'm just really frustrated with the voters. And I don't mean to turn this into like, because OKC blew this huge lead in game 1, we're going to overreact and just, trash Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's an exceptional player. I need to give him his credit first. Like, he is one of the most efficient and scalable on-ball scorers that we've seen in a number of years. And I think he is one of the very best defenders of MVP candidates that we've seen. Like, he participates on defense. He is very much a plus on defense. All of these things I think Shea is a great player, but like I think if the voting had been done with the voters having seen this playoff run, I think they would have given it rightfully to Nikola Jokic. He should have won 5 straight, and like despite giving all of these flowers to Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who's an exceptional player with an exceptional season, like I don't believe that Shea makes his teammates better in a way that most MVP candidates do. I think he, like I said, he participates defensively. He's very efficient, et cetera, et cetera. He's a great player to have, especially on this team. But he also had probably one of the lesser impact 38 point. Like, if you look at the box score, he scored 38 points, and it wasn't that inefficient in an NBA Finals. And it would probably be talked about more if OKC had won. But it just didn't feel that way watching the game. Like, a lot of his points were on possessions where his teammates did not touch the ball. Like, his 4 teammates, like he was especially late in the game. I know that he was strong for a lot of the game, and like he is your best player. He should be taking a lot of it. He earns that right. But a lot of those possessions down the stretch, he basically denied 4 teammates the opportunity to even touch the ball for an entire possession. He just gave that possession away to the Pacers. And again, I don't want to be this sort of like sour grapes. Let me trash on this really good player for losing one game. But I do feel strongly that it was one of the lesser impact 38-point performances. I don't think he was that additive offensively in this game. I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but I think a level of frustration with
38 on 30 shots is this is old like Kobe Melo kind of territory in terms of efficiency, which is like good but not great, and effective but not dominant. And dominant is what you're looking for in these spots. And you always wonder also with the really ball dominant players if some of the fourth quarter struggles of teammates and different things are impacted by sort of lack of flow, lack of rhythm, lack of touching the ball, being involved in different things like that. Kind of an unknowable basketball truism. But we got through the pod without mentioning the ratings, but we could not contain ourselves from getting into MVP talk. So we still fill the national broadcast check mark. We avoided who's a superstar and who's a super duper star. We avoided that conversation, and we avoided the ratings, but we could not avoid MVP talk. So, Austin, thank you for checking the Kendrick Perkins box portion of the episode. All right, that'll do it for episode 457 of the Established Run NBA podcast. We'll be back to review Game 2 on Monday with the normal cast of characters. Mike Gallagher will be back from his load management here in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. It'll be myself, Mike Gallagher, and Austin breaking down Game 2 and what we see, and we'll see if OKC can take care of business at home and even it up. For those of you listening on iTunes, Spotify, I appreciate you guys out there. Consider leaving a rating and a review to help circulate this podcast feed and our content, and giving us feedback on how to continue to improve and serve your needs as the audio listener. If you are a video YouTube watcher, Established Run NBA YouTube, consider hitting that like on the video or subscribing to the channel and catching more of our content. If you're interested in any of our premium content, you can go to establishedrun.com/subscribe-NBA for more details on our premium product offerings on the NBA side, or catch us on the WNBA side, where we're also providing premium product offerings for the DFS and prop betting gurus out there. So that'll do it for episode 457. For Austin, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke, we'll catch you next time.